Welcome to Ghostly.
Is Emily's Bridge haunted?
Ghostly is a podcast that comes out every other week. In each episode, we take a ghost story or paranormal event and look into its complete history. Rebecca then gives us evidence proving that the story is real, and my job is to debate those pieces of evidence and get you, the listener, prepared to vote on if it's real or not. And as always, we're your host. I'm Pat.
And I'm Rebecca.
And I think we have a pretty interesting episode. It's about a bridge.
Yeah, you know, we...
Over troubled water?
Well, I don't know. I guess that's a question. We've done one other bridge episode.
We did.
And so I'm excited.
And it didn't go well for you for that bridge.
Well,
I will say that.
We'll see. This one feels a little more solid, but we'll find out.
It is considered one of the most haunted areas in Vermont.
Absolutely.
So
I found so much stuff on it. It was kind of crazy.
Absolutely. A bunch of teenagers going out in the middle of the night.
Definitely.
All right. This is the time we usually do shout outs for people on Ghostly. There are two ways to get a shout out on Ghostly. The first way is to give us a review on Apple Podcast. You know, we always read any and all reviews that we receive. We always prefer those 5-star reviews, but you know, not every review is going to be a 5-star review. You might not like that we're talking about Vermont. You know, who knows?
That could be.
And also, too, the second way is to become a member on Patreon. Just go to ghostlypodcast.com and click on Patreon in the menu bar. We have a lot of different tiers to choose from. All of them get you a mention on this.
Absolutely. And we really appreciate it. You know, we do this out of the fun of our hearts.
Yes,
is what I'm going to say.
Yeah, we don't do this to get rich. There's been no getting rich done.
No, not at all. But we really appreciate those that support us.
Absolutely, we do. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, listening is absolutely a way to support us because we do get money from our ads. But joining us on Patreon just gives us that little extra boost that really helps us.
Yeah. And you know, another thing I'd like to say though is that we put 100% of our money, that any money that we show positive, we put it right back into Ghostly.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if you want to make Ghostly even better, you know, you can help us out and we'll help make Ghostly better.
Absolutely.
Maybe hire a new skeptic or something. I don't know. We'll see.
There you go. So we don't have any listener mail again this week.
Yeah,
so
which is a third way you could really get a shout out.
It really is. So we would love to hear your stories, especially coming up to spooky season. We have a lot coming up. So if you want to share your stories with us, you can send us an email at info@ghostlypodcast.com or use the contact us form on ghostlypodcast.com. One of our favorite ways to get ghost stories is in the actual mail. And you can send us a message at P.O. Box 264, Geneva, Illinois 60134. And as we always say, you're not going to remember all of that. Or maybe you're driving, so you don't want to write it down.
Yeah.
Which we don't want you to do that.
Please don't get in an accident.
Don't do that.
Because then we lose listeners. Right. And then we have to do a story about it.
Exactly. I was just going to say, you don't want to end up on an episode of Ghostly in the wrong way, right? End up for listener mail. So just go to ghostlypodcast.com and you'll find all of that information right there. You can also, of course, DM us on socials because we're on all the socials at Ghostly Podcast.
Absolutely.
All right. So we do have some polls from our last episode, which I seriously was one of my favorite episodes to record. Like it was just super, I don't know why. It was just, normally curses are a little weird because they're just a little different than what we normally do. But I really like talking about King Tut.
Yeah.
Curse of King Tut. And this one turned out very close, Pat. Are you ready for this?
No, I'm never ready for them.
So we had yes, 47%, no, 53%.
So it's a landslide victory for me.
It is not a landslide victory for anybody this time, but you edged it out.
Yeah, the overall rating, people can give an overall rating on how cursed or how haunted they believe something is. 1 being not haunted at all, 10 being the most haunted place ever. Can't do zeros on our polls for some reason.
Unfortunately.
3.1.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we've seen higher numbers.
Yeah, we have.
Respectable.
And we've seen lower numbers too.
We have. All right. So let's get into a ghost story.
Ooh, a ghost story. Yes.
So this is kind of a condensed version of a story that was published on medium.com. And I'll tell some more about it when we get to the end.
for a spooky tale from her bad girl.
The pitch black darkness smothered me. The rushing water of Gold Brook 10 feet below me echoed against the wooden walls and roof of the Gold Brook covered bridge in Stowe, Vermont. It filled my ears so that I could hear nothing but the vicious rush of water over rock, reverberating off the old wooden walls. But I could feel, and what I felt was the slightest sensation of something just barely brushing against my left arm. Just barely. I was the only one of my team inside what the locals call Emily's Bridge, probably the most famous haunted place in Vermont. I had just taken over the bridge shift from one of my investigation team, Claire, who had just wrapped up an EVP session and reported being lightly touched by something also. Again, I felt a slight sensation of something brushing up against the edge of my coat. I spun around and fumbled for my full spectrum camera. The pinkish purple hue of the LCD screen made my eyes squint in the darkness. I turned around full circle to confirm that I was the only one inside the bridge. I looked at my watch. It was 1 a.m. The fully charged battery in my camera was dead within 10 minutes, and the replacement only lasted 20. It should have lasted well over 2 hours. I am on my third battery, and I'm already getting a low battery indicator. Claire had complained that her audio recorder kept turning itself off, but only when she was inside the bridge. Our remote full-spectrum cameras have occasionally blinked off and then back on all evening. The bridge is not long at all, yet you feel isolated when you enter it alone in the dark. My sense of isolation quickly turned to anxiety when I heard, through the din of the rushing brook, the sound of something scraping on wood not more than 5 feet from me. The sound lasted just a quick second, enough to get my heart pumping. I turned my camera back on. The red low battery indicator threatened to leave me in the dark once again, eliminating what little comfort I had in the illumination from the LCD screen. I could not see anything in the bridge with me. No faint flashes of light, no moving shadows, no figures. I could barely make out the outline of our vehicle in the parking area beyond the bridge entrance. Then the scraping sound rushed towards me. I spun around and the LCD screen blinked off in an instant. I frantically pushed on the buttons, but the camera would not turn back on. I felt something ever so slightly nudge me from behind, and I ran out of the bridge, following the faint light that my team member had on our car. I felt instantly relieved once I left the bridge. My team bolted out of the car when they saw me. "Did you see anything?" I asked. "No, the cameras went down." "All 4 of them?" I asked incredulously. "Yes, just now," Claire chimed in. "She's not happy that we're here." We fiddled with the cameras for another 20 minutes, and it was clear that we were rapidly running out of batteries. I decided to wrap up our investigation by 2 a.m. Less than 15 minutes later, we were parked outside our rooms. "You guys have to see this," Claire exclaimed as she stood behind our vehicle. I walked around behind the car, and at the very top, left-hand edge of the back window was a partial handprint, the top portion of a palm with 4 fingers pointing straight down. The handprint looked like it was made by a young woman, and in order to make a handprint on our car like that, she'd have to be crouched on the roof of the vehicle, placing her hand on the top window so that her fingers pointed toward the ground.
All right. So how much of that is based upon any fact?
Well, it's based on a story that was published by a paranormal investigator, Davy Russell, ex-para investigations back in 2017 on medium.com is where I found it.
All right.
So I did, take out some things I would definitely recommend. I'll put the link in the show notes for people to go read the full story. But I figure we can dive into some of the things they mention as our evidence.
Okay, sure.
As we go through, because a lot of what happened to these folks is what people claim.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to get to the history.
interesting point of view. Facts, facts. He presents it all to you. Facts, 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 facts.
All right, you ready for some Pat facts?
Pat facts.
So Emily's Bridge is also known as Gold Brook Covered Bridge or Stowe Hollow Bridge.
It did make research a little difficult.
It did, yeah, absolutely. It's a small wooden covered bridge in Stowe Hollow, Vermont.
Okay.
And Stowe Hollow was an early settlement in Stowe. So it was one of the first settlements in Stowe.
Within Stowe.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Most of America's covered bridges were built between 1825 and 1875.
Really?
Yeah.
I would have assumed they were from like before then even.
Nope. Most of them were built during that time period.
Huh.
By the 1870s, most bridges were covered at the time of construction. So a lot of these other bridges are covered after the fact.
Oh, okay.
The original reason for the cover was to protect the bridge trusses and decks from snow and rain, preventing decay and rot.
I mean, that like makes sense. I don't know why I
Yeah.
didn't think of that, but yeah, that makes sense.
Well, this particular bridge was built in 1844, and it's just 50 feet long and covers Gold Brook. The type of bridge that it is called a How Truss Bridge. This was a popular type of bridge in its day because it was easily built without needing like an architect or an engineer. You just bought the plans for it.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And in fact, the Hoe Truss type bridge was patented in 1840, making this an early adopter.
Okay.
It's actually the only surviving 19th century covered bridge in the town of Stowe.
Okay.
And they called the brook that it covers Gold Brook because they actually found gold in there at one point.
You don't think of finding gold
In Vermont.
In
Yeah.
Vermont.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more of like a California thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the bridge was made with dark wood that the elements haven't been merciful on. Let me just say that
okay.
ever since. But around the time the bridge was built, the dark wood was still new, and it's had that smell of fresh pine, and creaked every time a horse-drawn wagon crossed it.
Okay.
Remember, this is horse-drawn carriages.
Right.
days.
No cars.
Yeah, no cars.
Makes sense.
So a young woman named Emily planned to elope with her love. Their meeting place was this very bridge.
Okay.
But he didn't show up. And legend has it that Emily was so distraught that she hanged herself from the rafters of the bridge. Now, I want to say, first of all, that this is legend. Okay, just so we're clear, this is in the Pat Facts, but it's legend.
Okay. It's a commonly told story.
It is, yeah. So if you plan to visit this bridge, I want you to take some caution because it is open to Stowe traffic.
Okay.
But the neighborhood does monitor it closely.
Oh.
So if you do want to visit this bridge, you should probably take one of the local ghost tours to avoid any kind of trouble that you might have.
Okay.
Just to be sure. The neighbors, don't want that much outside traffic, as nobody would in their neighborhood.
Gotcha. Now it does look like it has been paved now.
It is paved, yeah.
It is a road that goes through it, but it's pretty narrow. Like,
yeah, only one car could fit through it at a time.
Okay. Yeah, so it's not.
And I'd say if you have a gigantic Hummer or something like that, maybe don't go there. I don't know. I don't know how strong it is, So I would definitely take some caution with that.
I gotcha.
But it is right in a neighborhood though.
Oh,
there's houses that overlook it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And it is something I read too, right? So, again, the original name Gold Brook Bridge. But over the years, the Emily story has been so popular that it got the nickname Emily's Bridge, and people do call it that.
Yeah, they do call it that,
whether they believe it or not.
Yeah.
That's just it's often referenced that way.
Sure.
So.
All right. So that's about all I have. Do you want to add anything to this?
Just
small history section. I mean, it is of a bridge, so it's hard to have a whole complete history.
Sure. But it is something that is a popular thing for people to see. As you said, there's tours. It's really beautiful. I mean, if you're,
As far as every
Vermont.
covered bridge is.
Well, but Vermont is a beautiful place, and this particular place is pretty beautiful. And the fact that it's the only surviving example of that Howe Trust on a public roadway that you can easily see
in Stowe, Vermont.
In Stowe, Vermont. Well, there was another covered bridge, I guess, like down the way a bit, but that one's gone.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
All right. So I'm sorry that the history was so short, but it doesn't have much of a history.
Well, I think we all learned something, though. I mean, I did. I learned about covered bridges that I didn't know.
All right.
So I appreciate it.
We're going to take another short break, and when we return, we'll finally get to the debate. All right, Rebecca, you ready for a debate?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So, as Pat told us, the source of the hauntings for the bridge really all do come from that Emily story that you told us, right? And I've read that some will say that she's not a vengeful ghost, but others say that she is more malicious.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, after all of my reading, I tend to lean more towards the malicious or maybe just mischievous, at least, side, based on the stories that people tell. Like, she seems to be more active towards people rather than just being like an apparition that's reliving what happened to her.
Sure.
So I thought, like I mentioned, that, we could kind of go back to our ghost story because it brings up bunch of things that people claim to experience on the bridge.
Okay.
And we can go through each one as a separate piece, right? And so the first thing is that he claims that he feels like he's being touched. And he is not the only one to report this feeling. There's a lot of that where people feel they're being touched, or some even say scratched.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So what do you think?
Okay, so I'd like to say a couple things before we begin.
Yeah.
First of all, there's many variations on the Emily story. So mine was the suicide after being stood up by a lover.
Okay.
Although there's also an accident on the way to the wedding that might have caused it. Murdered by a lover after getting pregnant is another one.
Ooh.
But here's the thing. There's no historic evidence that back any variation of this. In fact, in the 70s, Nancy Wolfe Steed admitted that she fabricated the entire story to scare local kids because they were all going to the bridge. The name Emily was created by Steed. There was no Emily that has any kind of relation to this bridge. And there's no actual state of Vermont or other records exist of an Emily dying at the bridge prior to 1970 and after 1970 as well. So there's never been an Emily that died there. And what's interesting is that this isn't like the 1800s. Like, the story makes you feel like it is. Even like some people say the 1920s in a car accident. So it had to be the 20s. But the haunted reputation emerged around 1948 without having an Emily involved in it at all. So, that's one of the things. Which one were we debating right now?
We're talking about the being scratched or touched by people.
So, there are things that happen to people when, it's like the power of suggestion from the legend influencing their experience. Or also, there's another thing, like sometimes people forget things, and the forgotten mundane events later become sensationalized. This is one of the things that could be happening here. Also, a desire to experience supernatural taints the whole perspective of everything. So I don't know exactly which one that this is, but it's one of those, or a combination of them.
So
that is
just
causing,
that they were ready to experience something.
because they've heard of this, Emily. They've heard that this place is haunted. They know the story. It's such a sad story. They want to be part of it in some way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I'm going to save some of this. I think our overall thoughts we can definitely dive into in our kind of wrapping up, time frame. But I will say, so that is interesting to hear that, someone claims to have created the Emily story in the 1970s, but that people have been talking about it being haunted since the 40s. I did not hear that.
But it did not involve Emily at all.
So maybe it's not Emily, but that doesn't mean it's not haunted.
Well, the 1940s, around that time, you had a resurgence of the spiritual movement. So, and these bridges that are covered usually at that point did not have lights in them at all. So when you would go into this bridge, it was complete darkness. The only thing that there is at the top, like if you imagine like, not like a porta-john, but like a public bathroom that has like the top like layer is like left open to vent out everything. That's kind of what Emily's bridge has.
Interesting.
Is the top is open. So that lets in some light, but not much. And if it's not like a full moon or something like that, it's really dark in there. So a lot of times people might experience some kind of phenomenon when they go into some place that is dark like this, and they just want to attribute being haunted to it.
Okay. Now, what would you give it your rating?
Oh, I'm going to have to go 0 then, because there's no Emily.
Right. Well, I'm going to give it a 7 because these people felt something.
Okay.
And I don't know what it was.
All right.
All right. Now, the next thing they talk about is that their equipment malfunctioned. Right?
Yes.
And we've certainly heard about this in a lot of places we've talked about where their batteries get drained, other stuff happens. I will also just kind of put in here, there's claims of people hearing music, but they can't tell like what the source is. And I just wondered if maybe that came from malfunctioning. I can talk today. Equipment as well. I'm kind of throwing that in there, whatever, just to get it there. But anyways, what do you think about their equipment malfunctioning?
Well, okay. So the positioning of this bridge. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the sound. The positioning of this bridge is nearby houses.
Yes.
So, and it amplifies anything around it because of it being covered like that. So it takes any wind or anything like that in, and it amplifies it slightly. Enough where your ear doesn't really notice that it's amplified that much, but it is enough where it's like a trick of it's like an illusion kind of thing, except an audio illusion. As far as the equipment goes, I've been doing this for a while, Ghostly, and I've encountered this a lot. So I decided I was going to dive in and do some research into what this possibly could be.
Okay.
And there is actually a scientific reasoning for it. It's an electromagnetic field. Now, I will say, any spot of air or any place that you're in has a certain amount of electricity and magnets in it. And it's the combination and has to be a certain level. And scientists have proven that they have been able to disrupt watches, cell phones, cameras, all kinds of things. Therefore, like most pictures are not, taken at night in these kind of locations because, you can have this kind of thing happen. And also it's really too dark for photos. So not many people.
Depends on the kind of camera you're using, but yes.
Yeah. But most people don't really take it. So, I mean, this is something that would only be experienced by the paranormal then.
So, like you're saying, the electromagnetic is only at night?
It could be. I mean, it very well could be, but I don't think so. I just think that that's the only time that people are really. I mean, there might be wedding pictures. There's one in Naperville, a covered bridge in Naperville that I know people take pictures in, and that is done typically during the daytime. So maybe they don't have that electromagnetic field that's in the proportions that's causing that. But this particular one does.
Well, so here's my only question. So, I mean, it's a covered bridge over water. Like there's not a lot of electricity around it, but also the particular story that I read, his partner had been in there doing I guess an EVP session. He didn't say EMF session, but I feel like they had all this paranormal equipment, and like if they had gotten readings of EMFs, they would have said something about it.
It's not necessarily something that's found on those things. Okay, so let me tell you this too. A lot of the paranormal equipment that they use in studies, they have no idea why it triggers off, and if it does, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a ghost there.
But it could.
No, it can't. It can't, because there is no such thing. But anyways, I'm just saying, this is something that needs to be measured in singularity. You need to measure how much electricity is in the area and how much magnetism is in the area.
I mean, it just still seems odd,
but it is scientifically proven, so it's not, super science or anything like that.
Well, but what if the question is, though, that when there's paranormal activity, it does increase the electromagnetic energy in a space, and that's why often, people that are in those spaces, for a longer period of time using equipment, have their batteries drained much more quickly than they do in other places. So
but you're assuming a lot in this particular thing. You're assuming that the paranormal activity can boost it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it can. And scientists can cause this to happen in a lab. So they have been able to duplicate it, and they know what certain circumstances occur that can cause this. This could be one of those locations.
Right. Or
it's not a microclimate. It's an electromagnetic field climate.
All right. Well, so your rating of this being paranormal is?
Well, okay. So I'm going to do 2 ratings. Okay. I'm going to do the paranormal rating, which is a 0.
Okay. Coolness
factor, 10. Love that. Love that there could be areas like this that would do something like that.
Okay.
As I often tell the story of my father used to, whenever he would put on a watch, he would kill the watch within 2 weeks. And it was something to do with his chemistry interfered with the watch itself. So he created his own electromagnetic field.
That's really weird.
It is, but it happens sometimes.
Oh, okay.
It's a known thing.
Huh. Well, I still think there's possibility that it could come from the paranormal. There's nothing that says that it couldn't be.
There's nothing that says it could.
Right, there you go. So I give this one a 7 because, again, it's a common thing we see with paranormal areas. All right.
Okay.
Well, let's move on to our next one. The last thing from that investigation story is the handprint, right? This is absolutely one of the most told stories from over the years. Supposedly, years ago, as you mentioned, people traveled by horse and buggy or wagon, right? And what would happen is, as they were going through the bridge, the horses would panic sometimes and take off running. And then they would find marks on the horse, once they kind of calmed everything down and could look. Now, with cars get these handprints. And some people will say they look like claw marks. I mean, I've never heard that they've
So they get it in the car?
They've never dented the car. No. They're on the outside of the car.
On the outside of the car.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like they're causing permanent damage to the car. I haven't heard that, but they just they look like something grabbing the car.
Interesting thing, with cars, if you go to a supermarket and you get out of your car and you go in, and then you come out and you see a dent on your car, you need to prove that dent wasn't there before you got to the supermarket too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's when you rent a car, you got to take pictures of it so that it's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they
Same
take
thing
pictures
with
of
this.
Yeah.
The handprint could have happened before.
Or it could have happened because of the bridge. I don't know.
But there's no saying that it is. I mean, it's like you can't use that argument when it comes to like auto insurance and stuff like that. You can't say, well, they need to pay because I think it could have happened here. It wouldn't be true. They could say, well, it didn't happen here. It happened before you came here. And then it disproves
Well, what
it.
about the fact that it looked like it was somebody that did it from the top of the car, right? The hand print was going down.
Yeah. And how often does this happen?
I mean, it seems to be a pretty regular story that people tell.
Yeah.
So.
We also told the story about Munger Road and how there were handprints, but you have to put like flour on the car in order to see
I think
it.
often like the dust is what helps. Like I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm going to say that this is somebody that touched the car before they went in. Or also, most of these people are not going in there just casually riding through and then, oh, look at this, there's a handprint. They're going there for a paranormal investigation of some sorts. Whether or not they are professional paranormal investigators or just intrigued by it, para-curious, as some would say. But again, the desire to experience supernatural tainting perception or forgotten mundane event later sensationalized.
Well, or it could be because they're aware of the paranormal nature of things, they're more likely to spot and notice something that happened to them rather than somebody that is not thinking about things being paranormal, so therefore they don't notice.
Yeah, if I went into a supermarket that was notorious for dings on cars, I would definitely check my car afterwards. But then again, I didn't check it beforehand. So power of suggestion from the legend influencing experiences.
Well, again, we don't know that they didn't check their car beforehand, right? If you're a paranormal investigator, you would hope that they did.
Okay.
They would have that. So anyways, so it's again, it matters of do you believe these people or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the question as part of it, this particular story or the other stories told. So rating for you.
0.
All right. So for me, again, I'm giving it a 7. I'm going there. I feel like, there's some validity here to this story and what's happened to these people. Cause again, there's backed up by other people seeing it, but I'm not at a 10.
Also, there is one other thing that I would like to say, that this bridge exists in its current state because of how much interest that there is in this bridge.
Oh, like otherwise they would have changed it or
they tore down the other one.
Oh, I thought something happened to it, but maybe they just tore it down. I didn't pay that much attention.
I mean, there's no reason to keep it. Only one car can go by it at a time. They could make something better.
Yeah, but it's expensive. But it's also, if it's a popular tourist thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So I'm just saying that this paranormal activity kind of helps the legend of this bridge grow. And although everybody there knows that there was no Emily, that's pretty much, it's been debunked that there was any kind of Emily associated with this bridge. So maybe there was a paranormal investigator named Emily. I don't know, but I'm saying that there's nothing that would make this bridge called Emily's Bridge, but they still call it that.
Yeah. Well, again, who knows?
Okay.
Right. All right. Now, there is another story that I found that I wanted to share. And this one is more of a teen story. Okay. And it was by someone named Linda. She sent it to Spooky Appalachia. Okay. But it was posted on their outside of Appalachia page because obviously this isn't in Appalachia. And I just kind of smushed it down here. So Linda claims that as a teen, she and her friends went to the bridge looking for ghosts. Her friends were talking bad about Emily, which Linda herself did not approve of. Right. She says she has a touch of the, medium in her. They parked their car on the bridge itself. And they didn't see anything. Right. So they got out of the car, we're looking around. And then they got back into the car, but then the car wouldn't start no matter what they did. Everyone was freaking out because again, they were parked on the bridge and the car wasn't starting and they were afraid, someone's going to show up. And obviously they were kind of like, this seems, maybe paranormal. They were just about to get out of the car and look under the hood when the radio came on. It was the only light in the car, and playing on the radio was a song called Emily, by Elton John, by the way, but it was sung by like a female singer. She said, everybody panicked. Luckily they tried the car one more time and that time it started and they were able to get out of there.
I mean, again, it's a combination of all the stuff I've already talked about. Electromagnetic fields, if this really did happen. If not, it's the desire to be known for being in a paranormal spot. Or it is after the fact, you're like, hey, remember, didn't we have some car trouble? The car trouble could have happened outside of the bridge or might have happened down the way, and then they just attributed to it.
She said none of them talked about it after. They didn't want to talk about it.
But also, there is no Emily. So this is just
well, it's all a matter of who you believe.
It's just folklore,
right? Because do we believe this person who said, "Oh, by the way, I made all that up," and now she's famous?
I don't need to believe her. All I need to believe is that there's been no records of an Emily dying. So I do believe in the public record. Yeah, that would have been sensationalized. So, but instead, these people want their stories to be sensationalized. So.
Well, I just want to, I'm trying this time.
Sorry, Linda.
That's to bring stories of specific people, right? Because often we don't have stories of specific people who have experienced things. So, so to me, it definitely gives it more weight.
So like a 0, right?
No,
no.
Well,
That's what I'm going with.
This one I'm giving an 8.
An 8.
Rebecca. Again, it's a specific story.
Okay.
Written in, that wanted to share it.
Do you believe there was an Emily at this point?
I'm definitely more doubt it. Like, but maybe the name got reported. Maybe it wasn't Emily. Maybe it was something else.
There is one person that came up with the idea that it could have been somebody else, and then they attributed it to this person named Emily because the name was forgotten in time. But here's the thing. There's no public record of anything like this happening around those times. There was no automobile accidents. There was no hangings. There was no, murders committed there. So none of the stories fit anything that could have actually have happened there during the times.
I mean, I did read that it is possible that this was a story of something that happened on that other bridge that was just down the way. And that maybe the spirit kind of shifted over to this bridge, but hard to know. Yeah. But also, again, me. I mean, sometimes we have a story of what people have decided, like, hey, this is how we can, explain these paranormal things that happen there. Because I guess my question is, why didn't this woman want teens going to the bridge? Like, is it because she was scared of the paranormal things that were happening? Like
how you
there?
Still believe in the Amityville horror, even though it's been debunked for years.
Listen, again, do I think maybe it happened exactly the way? Maybe not, but might have been something. It was definitely weird.
All right, well, 0.
Let's move on. We got one last little thing I know what you're going to say to this one, but I have to put it in because it's definitely something people talk about. People share a lot of pictures with orbs that they take on there. There isn't anything like different than I didn't even share these photos with you because it's literally exactly what you picture.
Picture an orb.
Picture a photo with an orb in it.
And a bridge.
And a bridge. And sometimes there's people, sometimes it's just a photo of the bridge, but there's a lot of photos with orbs.
Yeah, well, this particular location is prone to have those little things that are unexplainable happen there. Just because of its location, because of the construction of it, with the opening at the top, and that it allows some light in, but not much light in, and because of that it is not, that there's gaps in between the wood in certain spots too, so that lets in light and stuff. And this spot has been known to have weird little things like this happen, but they are all explainable by science. This could be the window coming, the light coming in from a particular spot on the bridge, or it could be a bug, it could be dust, it could be any of the other reasons why orbs happen. So big 0 on this one. In fact, if I can go negative 300 on this one, I would.
I definitely have my questions on orbs. I think sometimes.
I mean, we've actually talked to photographers,
right,
and that say that they could duplicate orbs,
right. So, unless I see a video where like there's an orb that's moving in a weird way or something like that's different. These are photos. But I will just want to point out that Pat just said this is a place where unexplainable things happen. So I'm just putting it out there.
Okay.
So for me, this one's a 5.
All right. 5. So what would be your overall rating then?
So I'm going to give it a 7 overall, right? Because I had a little higher, a little lower, but most were 7. How about for you?
I average out 0. So that brings us to the closing arguments. This is our last chance to convince you to vote our way. We are each given 1 minute of uninterrupted time, and we time ourselves on our cell phones because we want to make sure that Rebecca doesn't cheat.
Hey, now.
Rebecca, are you ready?
I am ready.
I have 1 minute on the clock and start.
All right. So I do think there is a chance that this is a place with spookiness. I mean, it may not be Emily. Maybe that's just the name that's been given to this entity that's there. But the reality that it's been going on since the time of the horses. And yes, at some point, someone made up a story, potentially, I guess, that kind of tried to explain some of this. But that doesn't take away from the fact that people feel things, see things, hear things, experience things. We had stories from, people that claim this. They put their name out there and associate themselves with it. So to me, and we have Pat saying that this is a place where mysterious things happen. So, I think it's haunted.
All right. You had 10 seconds left.
Yeah.
But, okay.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
All right. And go.
Okay. So the start of it is that there was no Emily. Emily didn't die there. Nobody died there with these particular circumstances. There was no legend of this story during horse times. This was 1948, that around the time that they can say that the legend began, which could have began with some housewives in houses in the area that didn't want to be disturbed. There's a lot of explanations for a lot of these things. And yeah, this is one of those spots where weird things seem to happen, but it doesn't mean anything. All of them can be explained eventually using science. The orbs can be explained. There's no woman in white here, so it cannot be haunted. If there was an Emily here, there would be a woman in white. I'm gonna just call this one that there's no way possible. This has been debunked before. Once you debunk Emily, you spiral into everything.
Oh, time's up. You went over.
I did not go over. I stopped before the bell.
No, you didn't.
All right. So I want to thank everyone so much for listening. Please share us with your friends and family. Word of mouth is our best advertisement.
Yes, we appreciate you sharing it.
Absolutely. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. And I'd like to give a shout out to our VIP producers. We have Andrew,
Alicia,
Becky,
Cindy,
Kevin,
Jessica,
Alice,
Aaron,
Hope,
and Candy.
And on the next episode of Ghostly, we're going to be talking about the old prison and Confederate cemetery in Alton, Illinois, supposedly one of the most haunted areas in the world. And we're going to have a special guest, and I'm not going to give any information about this special guest, but he is someone new to Ghostly.
Yeah, new guest.
Well, he's been a listener for a long time.
Right, but super, super excited to have him on, and this was his choice of
This was
place,
his choice, yes.
which was a good one because it's spooky season, so we're going to one of the spookiest towns ever.
And it comes out on September 25th. Then we will take 1 week off before starting our weekly episodes of Ghostly. For the spooky season, talking about haunted airports.
Yeah.
And we have guests lined up for a couple of the episodes. I think this is going to be really good. I think we're going to have a lot of variety, and I want you to stay ghostly during this time, especially.
Bye.